Emmanuel Navon from Tel Aviv University and our diplomatic correspondent Mike Wagenheim. Emmanuel, let me start with you first. The United States yesterday evacuated all of its non-essential staff from its embassy in Baghdad. An extraordinary turnaround considering just how large that operation was until recently. Is there a genuine risk of a direct confrontation between Iran and the United States?
I think the risk at this point exists because the Iranian economy is really suffering at this point from the sanctions, and you can see that the Iranian regime is really on the defensive and is really provoking the United States, trying to break the sanction regime, but it doesn't look like this strategy is working, and therefore the provocations coming from Iran might provoke a confrontation with the United States. Don't forget that a very sensitive point is the Straits of Hormuz. About 20% of the oil exports, the world oil exports go through the Straits of Hormuz, and if the Iranians try to close that strait, so obviously that would lead to a war between the U.S. and the Iranian regime.
And indeed, we have seen tension inside the Strait of Hormuz just this week. The suspected sabotage attack on the 4 oil vessels. We don't know who was behind it. Suspicions Iran at least had a hand as well. Houthi rebels are using drones to attack Saudi oil refineries, forcing them to shut the east-west pipeline. What are Iran's considerations in asking itself whether it wants to try to engage in, I suppose, a managed escalation in the Strait of Hormuz?
I think it's very significant that they've been attacking the Saudis via the Houthis in the south and also the sabotage operations, because the Trump administration is very much behind Saudi Arabia, but despite everything that happened in Saudi Arabia in the past year. And I think this is a way for the Iranians to really test the Trump administration. And if the Trump administration is steadfast in its support of the Saudi regime, this would be another indication that a confrontation between Iran and the United States is likely. And of course, then the next question is, what would the U.S. administration do when it comes to international organization and to the Security Council? My guess is that the Trump administration wouldn't care so much about a veto at the Security Council to take action against Iran, but this will have to say in the coming months.
You know, when I have a look at the United States engaging in this escalation with Iran, I'm having deja vu to North Korea, another rogue state where the United States certainly aggravated a crisis and then pulled back from the brink with a big diplomatic maneuver. Do you see a scenario in which what Donald Trump is doing is trying to aggravate a crisis in order to sweep in with some big diplomatic summit, possibly, and take credit for easing the tensions?
I doubt it. First of all, there's much more at stake with Iran than with North Korea.
Why so?
Because when it comes to Iran, it's really about the world economy. It's about oil. It's about a nuclear program that is much more threatening than the North Korean one. And so, yes, the North Korea is a headache for the United States, but it's not as bad a threat as Iran. Iran operates many proxies throughout the Middle East. Iran has operations throughout the world, in South America and in Africa. So Iran is much more of a threat for the U.S. than North Korea. And also for the Trump administration to go for the scenario that you just described, then it would have to show some result and some success with North Korea, which it doesn't have. In other words, the negotiations with North Korea haven't produced anything significant. So why would the Trump administration want to repeat the scenario when this scenario has been a failure?
So?
Well, you know, how much show can you have? You also need some results. So I don't see at this point, because of the failure of the negotiation with North Korea, any willingness, in my opinion, of the Trump administration to repeat such a scenario with Iran.
What are Iran's options now going forward? There seems to be some tension inside Iran between the more radical and let's say, the less radical, if not quite moderate factions. What options do they have other than capitulating to the United States demands and agreeing to a reinforced, buttressed Iran deal?
What they're trying to do is really divide and rule. They're trying to divide between the permanent members of the Security Council that signed the nuclear deal in 2015, between the European Union and Russia and China. The strongest card at this point is China, because China is really dependent on oil and natural gas imports from Iran, and the Chinese are not interested in a confrontation. So the Iranians are going to try and play one member against the other, but at the end of the day, if the Trump administration is really steadfast about keeping the sanctions, and if the Iranian economy keeps crumbling as it is right now, there will be really a limit to which the Iranians will be able to play that game between the permanent members of the Security Council that signed the JCPOA in 2015.
Dr. Navon, thank you. Mike Wagenheim, let's go to you now in Israeli domestic politics.